Good evening, everybody. My name's Jo Edgerton. I'm the Pre-16 Manager at Nottingham College. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for our information evening regarding our electively home educated courses at Nottingham College. Just to give you a brief overview, if you do have any questions as we go through, you can post those via the question and answer function on Teams. We've got people behind the scenes who will be able to answer those questions if necessary or able to. Otherwise, I will have them on screen as well, and I'll attempt to answer them as we go through. We will run through it as quickly as we possibly can. Last time we did this, we were here until just after 7, but I'm going to try to keep to time as much as possible. Those of you who submitted questions prior to the event, I'm hopeful that what we have got in terms of the presentation will cover those answers, but if you do have any further questions at the end of the presentation, there will be email addresses available on the screen for you to take down so that you can email us directly, or you can continue to use the question and answer function via Teams. Okay, I think we're good to go with the next slide. Thank you. So just to, obviously I've introduced myself as a Pre-16 manager, but just to let you know the other members of the Pre-16 and schools team, we've got Hilda Slynn, who actually is in the background and available to answer any questions as they are published on the question and answer function, and she's our coordinator. She organises us all within the office. She is queen of data. She keeps us all on our toes and makes sure that we're doing everything that we're supposed to be doing, and is also extremely helpful in terms of any queries or calls that anybody may have coming into the team. And then we've got James Smith, who is our student attendance and support officer. So it's James who will be contacting any parents who where a child has not attended college, and it's also James that parents should be contacting if they are notifying the college that their child is unable to attend. Okay, next slide. So just to give you an overview of what we'll cover in tonight's event, we'll go through the different course options for our home educated learners. I'll talk a little bit about student support and safeguarding, what's available from a financial support situation, and then the application to enrolment process. And then again, as I've said, there'll be opportunities for questions at the end. Next slide, thank you. So just to go through the bespoke programmes that we have for our elective home education students, we've got the Entry 3 preparation for college, pre-GCSE programme, the GCSE programme, Year 11 infill programme, and then the vocational short courses. And I'll talk about each one of those as we go through the presentation. Next slide, thank you. So Entry 3 preparation for college, this is a course that's based at Basford Hall, and we've run it for the first time this year, and it has been very successful. We've got 2 groups that are running, where we initially only started with 1 group. It includes English and Maths functional skills at Entry 3, although if students are working at level 1, we often will, well, I say often, we have got students that we're entering for level 1, so a level above that. It also includes the BTEC vocational skills qualification, which is very much focused on employability skills, team building skills, identifying strengths and areas for development, and coming up with action plans and things like that. We're also hoping to be able to offer vocational tasters in a variety of areas, but that doesn't happen until the 3rd term of the course. So if a young person's got a particular interest in, say, construction or hair or beauty or motor vehicle or engineering, we're hoping to be able to offer vocational tasters in those areas as well as part of that course. But it would still remain, it wouldn't be outside of their timetable, it would be within their usual timetable. So this course is aimed at those wishing to take a more vocational route, and also those that are looking to or need to build confidence in their English and math skills. We often find that young people who've had a bumpy ride within education for whatever reason do need that sort of more nurturing and supportive environment to build their confidence, just being in college in general, but particularly perhaps in English and maths. And then, I've just explained that, about the home educated students who may find school environment challenging and need further support around study skills. So it's very much designed to help those students that may have been in a school setting previously, or those students that we know just need that work around building confidence. And from that programme, students can progress on to a level 1 programme, which could be the pre-GCSE programme, which I'll come on to talk about in a moment, or vocational courses within the college as well. Next slide, thank you. So this is just an example of the timetable. Obviously, as I said, we have got 2 groups, so the other timetable looks slightly different, but you can see it's 2 lessons of English a week, 2 lessons of maths a week, and then the rest of the time there's 1 tutorial session, the rest of the time is the vocational studies session. It works quite well in terms of students being able to come in for those 3 days. They like the fact that they've got 2 full days off of college as well. Next slide, thank you. So the pre-GCSE programme, this is available to students in the equivalent of years 10 and 11. I think in the information that we have sent out to parents previously, we've made it clear that because of changes to the funding methodology, we aren't able any longer to offer this programme to year 9 students, or any of our programmes to year 9 students. They do need to be in years 10 and 11. This programme allows students to get to know college expectations and mature in a safe and controlled learning environment. It's functional skills, English and maths at level 1 with the new standard, so it's much more designed to be around preparation for GCSE with these new functional skills. I say new, they've been around for a couple of years, but as I say, very much designed to prepare students for GCSEs. That said, it is a slightly different way of presenting English and maths to the GCSE programme. It is the only qualification that we can offer that's lower than GCSE, which is why we do the functional skills. So incorporated into the programme is a college certificate in science, and that is designed to prepare students for the GCSE programme. So it covers the Key Stage 3 science curriculum, and then for those students who might want to go on to specialise in any one of the 3 GCSE sciences, biology, chemistry or physics, it's designed for that purpose as well. Included in the programme is the enrichment and tutorial, and that sort of covers things like enterprise, career planning, personal and social development programme. And students from this course will often progress on to a GCSE programme or the vocational in-full programme if appropriate. So it really just depends on the young person and what their interests are and what they might like to do in the future, but also potentially where their skill levels lie in terms of actually are they a more vocationally minded learner anyway, and that maybe the GCSE route, the academic route, isn't the most appropriate for them. We do need students to reach a level 1 at their initial assessment to access the programme, and I'll come on to talk about the initial assessments a little bit more later on in the presentation, and just explain a bit more about that. And then we have 2 groups, so it all takes place at high pavement, and there will be a maximum of 18 in the class. We did used to keep it to 15 in the class, but unfortunately, I say unfortunately, the college likes us to increase numbers where we can, and because there is definitely a need for that cohort, then we can increase that up to 18, but it's still a relatively small class size. Next slide, please. So this is an example of a timetable from the pre-GCSE programme this year. As I said earlier, it is all based at our high pavement campus, and you can see that there again are 2 lessons of maths, 2 lessons of English, 3 lessons of science, divided up into the 3 separate subjects, although often what we found this year is that they'll do their biology for the first few weeks, and then they might do a topic on physics, and then they might do a topic on chemistry. So it's not necessarily that they will have the subjects divided up in that particular way. You can also see the enrichment programme there, 2 lessons of enrichment. Our students do really enjoy that. It is another way of being able to introduce some of the subjects and subject matter that they might study in some of the humanities subjects on GCSE as well, and also looks at lots of things within sort of current affairs, mental health and so forth. And then 1 lesson of tutorial. So this programme is an all or nothing programme. It's not that you can sort of opt in and say, well, I'd like to come and do my English and I'll do the sciences, but I'm not interested in anything else. We do need students to attend for all of their lessons so that they get the full package and are as prepared as they can be in order to be able to progress on the following year. Next slide, thank you. So the GCSE programme. This is available again to students in the equivalent of years 10 and 11. We do all of our GCSEs within a year. So what we often find is that students will join us in year 10. They will do maybe 3 or 4 subjects in their first year with us, and then they will do a further 3 or 4 subjects the following year as well. The only thing to say, if that may be one of your the plans for your particular young person, is just to consider that doing GCSEs within a year is a big ask. There's a lot of work to be covered, and it might be appropriate to sort of think, well, actually, maybe in the first year, let's go with 3 subjects and maybe another 3 the following year. That's still going to give enough qualifications in order to be able to progress. But just to get an idea of what's involved in terms of studying that GCSE within a year before taking on maybe 4 subjects. But as I say, students can, if they want to, choose up to 4 subjects from the following list. So English language, English literature, the maths, I'll come on to talk about that in a moment, which we deliver at Foundation, biology, chemistry, physics, history, psychology, sociology, religious studies and business. Now, maths has got Foundation in brackets there. That's because our delivery for maths is for the foundation level, but that's not to say that we don't try to support students who want to have a go at the higher level as well. Where we can, it's possible sometimes for us to be able to infill our pre-16 students into post-16 GCSE maths higher classes if the timetables allow. So that is one option in which we can allow students to access the higher syllabus and curriculum. The other way is that our tutors, both our maths tutors, can work with students within their class whilst they may attend the foundation lessons. They will also then be provided with some supplementary work for the higher topics as well within lessons, and support can be found that way. But we do also then ask that those topics are also covered at home. And then students are able to sit the mock higher paper, and if they get a good grade in the higher paper in the mocks, then they will be entered for higher. So we're not saying that we won't support students wanting to do higher, but it's just to explain there's a slightly different way of doing it other than a sort of straightforward class for our pre-16s doing higher maths. So the programme also includes mandatory tutorial sessions. So that's 1 hour a week. So if you are doing 4 subjects per week, that will mean 16 hours because each subject is 4 hours over the week. And in a moment, we'll have a look at the timetable. So an example of a timetable so you can see what that might look like, plus 1 hour tutorial a week as well. So you're looking at 17 hours per week. All the subjects are graded 9 to 1 now. Our rewarding body is AQA, so if anybody is wanting to get a head start on their GCSE studies for next year, then you can start looking at some of the AQA support materials that's readily available. And so in terms of getting onto the GCSE programme, we do have entry requirements, which is that we need students to be at a grade 3 in the initial assessment in both their English and maths. And when a student is invited for initial assessment, you do get further information about how that assessment is broken down. But again, I'll speak about that in a moment when we talk about the whole application to enrolment process. Next slide, please. So this is an example of a GCSE programme. Obviously, we can't show all of the subjects because that would just be a huge slide that nobody would necessarily be able to make much sense of. But this is just an example of a student who studies English literature with ourselves, maths, psychology and English. So you can see that the 4 hours of each subject is split up into 2 1-hour sessions per week. And then there's the 1 hour tutorial on there as well. As much as possible, we do try to make that tutorial on the days that the student will be in college. but sometimes it's not always possible, particularly if a student's only coming in for maybe 1 or 2 lessons a week. If there's not a tutorial happening on that day, then it sometimes the case that a student does need to come into college just for their tutorial, but that's quite rare. So you can see that it would offer more flexibility than a school timetable, but you can also see that if you're doing 4 GCSEs, you're likely to be in college every day. It is sometimes possible that students will have a full day where they don't need to be in college, but because of the intensity of the GCSE programme, there is an expectation that the time outside of college will be used to make sure that a student is doing independent study and doing extra work and their homework, so that they can that they can achieve the best that they can at the end of the year. Every subject will set homework, and normally that will be every week. Sometimes subject tutors will set a piece of homework that's quite a long piece of homework, and that might be over 2 weeks, but a student can expect to do maybe an hour at least per subject of homework each week. But as I say, there is still that expectation that there's additional independent study revision that's going on those days, on the days and times when they're not in college as well. Next slide, thank you. Okay, so the Year 11 infill programme. So this is only available to students in the equivalent of Year 11, and that's from the reason that we do that is from a safeguarding perspective, because infill means that these students are working alongside our 16 to 18 students. So in effect, they are studying exactly the same programme as our post-16 students, and we just infill them into those courses. So we don't want there to be too great an age gap between the students, and we don't want there to be any sort of concerns from a safeguarding perspective. So there are a range of vocational areas available across all the sites. And the best way to sort of look at what is available is to go onto our website and have a look under the courses section of the website, just to see what is available there. By and large, we can only offer a level 1 programme, so that's the sort of level 1 is broadly equivalent to the lower grades of GCSE, so 3 down to 1. But because it's a vocational programme, it's very hard to draw that sort of kind of equivalency between the two of them, because obviously it's much more hands-on and much more practical. But hopefully that explains a little more about how a level 1 programme exists, how it works, sorry. So it does mean, obviously, that because we are infilling students onto post-16 programmes, that there will be older students on that course. Most of those students will be 16 to 18-year-olds, but sometimes there are sort of 19 plus students on that programme. If that is the case, we always make sure that we're very alert to that, and that students aren't left unsupervised within classrooms in case there are any kind of safeguarding concerns from that perspective. But it obviously is also important to explain that those students then would not be exclusively home educated in the same way as they are on the Entry 3 programme, pre-GCSE and GCSE programme. So the programme would include a vocational qualification, and actually there has been a slight update to this that has only happened this week, so apologies that it hasn't been updated onto the slide here. But actually, because of funding restrictions, again, the college is only able to offer courses that are under 579 hours per year, which does mean that next year we are not going to be able to offer both English and maths on infill programmes. Students are going to have to choose one English or one maths to be able to do. They can't do both because it would take us over our funded hours and would put us in a tricky situation with our funding organisation. So unfortunately, we aren't able to offer both English and maths. So our advice is then that obviously, because our students are home educated and our parents retain responsibility for providing education for their young person, and that as part of that they can choose to send them to college, but that in this circumstance with the infill programme, we'd be asking parents to sort of pick up whichever of the English and maths they weren't doing in college, just so that they were as prepared as they could be in terms of being able to progress on to other courses when they are post-16. So that English or maths can be functional skills or GCSE, and that will depend on their knowledge at entry. So that again will depend on what results students get through their initial assessment. So in order to do the GCSE, again, we would need GCSE initial assessment grade 3. And if anything below that would mean that students would be doing the functional skills instead. Okay. I can see that there's a question that's already been answered, so that's good. Okay, next slide, thank you. Okay, so we also offer vocational short courses. So this is designed, some of our students just come in for these vocational short courses because they've been out of an education environment for a considerable length of time, or perhaps have never been in to an education environment, that's considered more mainstream. And so for them, it's quite a gentle introduction to college. Our vocational short courses usually run over 3 hours a week, normally a morning or an afternoon, and at different points throughout the year. And the courses that we offer are art and design at level 1 and level 2. So they are 2 separate courses, but they are generally taught at the same time with tutors in the same workshop. So actually, if a student comes in having applied for level 1, if very quickly the tutors can identify that actually they've got quite a talent, then they can be transferred across to the level 2 programme as well. As a general rule, and has always been the case, but I can't guarantee it will be the case next year, the art and design courses usually run on a Thursday afternoon, if anybody wanted that detail. We also offer a Performing Arts Level 1 programme. We have offered it this year with a qualification, a nationally recognised qualification, a BTEC award. However, the sort of requirements for that award have been quite technical and quite sort of not quite what our students have been expecting, because there's been a need to identify sort of careers within performing arts and coming up with a development plan. And for a lot of our young people, what they want to do is to come in and practice their performing arts skills and develop those performing arts skills. So we are looking at developing a college certificate at level 1 specifically for performing arts, so that it can be much more practical in its nature and hopefully meet the needs and sort of expectations of our students a little bit better. And then we've also, this year, for the first time, we've run a creative media programme, which is has proved to be very successful. Our students really enjoy that course. So that's an opportunity to learn more about the sort of creative media industry. They do projects around photography, a little bit on video as well. They do all sorts of things on that are really interesting. They have going on a trip tomorrow, in fact, to sort of take photos around and about Nottingham, looking at Nottingham then and now. So yeah, it's quite a varied course, that one. So we did used to, and I'm aware that some of you may have made an early application where you were asked whether or not you wanted to choose a vocational short course. We did used to have a catering course, which was hugely popular, and if we could run it again, we would. Unfortunately, with the move down to the new city hub for our catering team, we just have not got the space to be able to deliver it. That said, the curriculum manager has committed to looking at his timetables in the summer when he knows what his recruitment is for his full-time students, and if he can identify a kitchen space where he could run a course for home educated students, he's very happy to put that on. So if that is going to be the case, we'll obviously contact people to say actually that this course can run, and it can run on this time, and then we take applications on a first come first serve basis. It is important to note that with our vocational short courses, we do need at least 10 students in order for the courses to run. So it is possible that if we don't get strong enough recruitment, these courses won't go ahead. But we haven't been in that position previously, but it's just important to note. So if your young person is thinking about maybe the pre-GCSE course or the GCSE course, they can also study one of these vocational short courses alongside it. But it would only be, well, if you're doing the pre-GCSE programme, it would only be able to be one of the short courses. If you're doing a GCSE programme, you can choose one of these short courses in place of one of the 4 subjects. So technically you could do 3 of these short courses plus 1 GCSE, or 2 GCSEs plus 2 short courses, and so on. But it does depend on the timetables that are produced, because the GCSE and pre-GCSE timetable are produced by one curriculum team, and then obviously the timetables for these vocational short courses are provided by other curriculum teams. So there can sometimes be a clash, and it's not always possible for students to access these vocational short courses. We won't know that until the timetables are produced, and those aren't done until more like, well, we usually don't get them until June, July time. Okay, next slide. I'll just check that there are no questions that I'm not being able to, there we go. Okay, so I can see that there's a question about whether there being a chance that the GCSE course won't be able to do all 4 of her selected courses because of scheduling. I guess technically it is a possibility that sometimes there is a clash with subjects, but the way in which the timetable is designed and put together, the curriculum manager does her very best to make sure that there aren't any clashes, and where there are clashes, it's clashes with subjects where we've got multiple subjects happening. So for example, we've got 2 biology classes, 2 psychology classes, 4 English classes, 3 maths classes. So where there does need to be a clash, it's normally alongside those courses that have got at least double numbers in terms of classes, so that we can avoid those kind of clashes. But on very, very rare occasions, there are sometimes times when we can't fit the subjects into a timetable that somebody may have chosen. In terms of somebody being told that there was no art course this year, I'm really sorry if that was a miscommunication. I wonder if that was just information with regard to the catering course, but the art courses certainly are running next year. Okay, so just moving on then to actually, before we move on to college expectations, just to sort of go over what we've spoken about with regard to those courses. Obviously, enrolment onto these programmes does depend on students being home educated. So that means that they are deregistered from school if they've been in a school environment previously, and that the local authority are aware that they are being home educated. Now, I do know that there may be some students who have been home educated all their life and they've not necessarily registered with the local authority as being home educated, because I understand that that's not a requirement for those students who have never been within the education system. But it's important then to note that we as a college will still provide the local authority with the list of names of students who have applied and who have enrolled, so that they can check their own records. And it may be that if you aren't known to the local authority, they will contact you to get some further details and just to make sure that they are registered with their elective home education teams. We do, as I say, need students to be home educated. If they are not home educated, then we cannot draw down the funding for them. So it is really important that parents do understand that. We do appreciate that there may be some parents who have applied for courses or are thinking about applying for courses who haven't yet made that full decision, or haven't yet had the opportunity to register their child from school, or are planning on doing that at the end of this academic year. And we do understand that they want to maintain some form of continuity of education. That is fine, but what we do ask is that they still make contact with the local authority prior to deregistration, so that they are aware of your intention to home educate, so that when we send our lists through, it makes sense to them and they're aware of those names on there. Okay, so moving on then to, hold on, there are some questions, sorry. Just to read this, my child is currently in mainstream school in year 10 and is studying 7 GCSEs in total over 2 years. Would they only be able to study for 4 subjects in total if we decided to do the GCSE option now and they transferred over at the end of year 10? Yes, that is the case, unfortunately. We do appreciate that in schools they will be doing a wider number of GCSE subjects, but because of our delivery only being within a year, one, it's not physically possible for us to be able to get students through 7 GCSEs within a year, but also from a funding perspective, we're only funded for a certain number of hours per year, which is why we have to restrict it to those 4 subjects. Okay. So question, my daughter is in year 10 at present, so where would she stand? She wants to do GCSEs with performing arts, but her maths is not good. Okay, well, when we come on to talk about the initial assessments, I can explain a little bit more about what might happen if the initial assessment, the entry criteria isn't met. There are other options that we can look at, absolutely. If she's currently in year 10, one option might be that we could look at an infill placement onto a performing arts course that might include either the English or the maths. Or alternatively, it may be that she reaches entry criteria for English but doesn't meet it for maths, in which case we could look at English subjects and humanities subjects for the GCSE programme. Oh, right, okay. Okay, just having a look at these other questions. Okay, so there's a question here about progression from the pre-GCSE programme. If somebody were to do the pre-GCSE programme, would they then be able to go on to do a GCSE course and complete that when they're in year 11? That is absolutely a possibility. The pre-GCSE course is designed obviously to be a precursor to the GCSE programme, but not all of our students on pre-GCSE will want necessarily to take the academic route and might want to look at an infill programme in year 11. But I would guess the majority of our students on pre-GCSE do progress onto the GCSE programme. It's not a prerequisite for students to pass their pre-GCSE course to get onto the GCSE programme, nor is it that if they do pass that course that they automatically get onto the GCSE programme. The entry criteria for GCSE still stands, so regardless of the outcome of their results at the end of a pre-GCSE course, they would still need to do the initial assessment for the GCSE programme to check that they met entry criteria for GCSE. And there's a question about, can I do these vocational courses with, oh, Holder's answered that one. Yes, you can do the vocational courses without registering for the GCSE. Gosh, there's lots of questions. My child is currently in mainstream school. Oh, well, I've done that one. So I will come on to talk about support for dyslexia, dyscalculia and any other support needs later on in the presentation. It's difficult to say how many places there are in the GCSE programme because it's divided up into subjects, but for each class per subject we can have up to 22 students in the class. Slightly fewer for biology, it's only 20 for biology because of the capacity of our biology lab, and slightly fewer again, 20 again for business studies, again because of they use a computer room and there are only 20 desks available in that particular room. So able to give a closing date for the latest we can make a final decision on courses for next year. Have applied for GCSEs, but we're not sure if they might clash with other educational commitments, so we can't tell at this stage whether we want to register with you for 4 GCSEs or just 1. Okay, so we're aware that a number of students will often have commitments outside of college and do online courses as well, and that can impact in terms of their availability with timetable. There's no sort of hard and fast rule about there being a closing date for letting us know or changing subjects. The only thing that we can say is if you've got your application in now and you got it in quite early, we would do our best to make sure that we could honour any changes that you made to any subjects. But as I said, the timetables aren't available usually until the end of June, early July, so we wouldn't be able to give you a sort of definitive answer as to any clashes until that point. There's a question about somebody who's already attended initial assessment on Monday. Should we have had this information before then? There's no information that's going to be within this presentation that you would have needed for the initial assessment on Monday. So rest assured, there's nothing that will come out of today's presentation that will have been a disadvantage to your daughter. And okay, there is a question about it has to be home educated. Yeah, in order for us to be able to draw down the funding, we do need students to be home educated. Sarah, I can see that's your question. At the end, we will put up a slide with contact information on. What I would suggest is that you contact us directly to talk about that separately away from this presentation. Then I can talk you through options available. Okay. And then, okay. So I can see Hilda's answered that last question. So thank you for bearing with me while I just worked through those questions. Hopefully that's answered the majority of the questions that people had. So moving on, just to talk through very quickly college expectations. Our biggest expectation from our students is that to be kind, and that means to be kind to yourself. So that means looking after yourself, making sure that you know, you're doing everything that you can to sort of keep your mental health as good as it can be, to try not to put too much pressure on yourself, which I know is hard when you're in a learning environment, but really to try to look after yourself as best as you can. To be kind to others and to your learning environment. So we put be kind to others for obvious reasons. You know, we've got a lot of young people who have come out of a school environment because they've really struggled from a social perspective and perhaps have been the victim of bullying. And we are very clear that that is something that we absolutely will not tolerate. And so long as we are made aware of it, we will do everything that we can to clamp down on that and follow our disciplinary procedures. We are under no obligation to carry on providing education to our home educated students because they are home educated and the responsibility for education lies with the parent. So that does mean that we are not restricted in the same way as schools in terms of withdrawing students from programme. But if we do find that our students aren't living up to our expectations in terms of the way that they are interacting with one another, then we will withdraw students and have done that in the past. And obviously we want students to be kind to their learning environment. So that's being respectful, making sure that rubbish isn't left lying around, that if any food is eaten, any food waste is put into the bin, that we're respectful of the learning environment by thinking about others within it. So, you know, being quiet and walking calmly around corridors and so forth. So we do want our students to have our expectation is that attendance will be at 95%. We know, and obviously with everything that we've all lived through in the last 2 years, that people will come down with illnesses and there will be days when students won't be able to attend, and we absolutely understand that. In those circumstances, we ask that parents do contact James, our attendance officer, just to notify us of the reasons. If a student doesn't attend college, James on a daily basis and a lesson by lesson basis checks attendance, and where students haven't attended, he will be contacting parents. I'll come on a little bit later around some of the safeguarding issues around attendance as to some of our processes and procedures there. We want students to be punctual to all our lessons. Again, you know, we're running courses in quite a short period of time, whether it's the entry 3, the pre-GCSE or the GCSE programme. And if students do miss any lessons because they've arrived late, then that can have an impact on their learning. We ask that all holidays and appointments are made outside of college times. I know as home educators, you have the luxury of being able to book holidays outside of school time anyway. But if you are sending your child to college, we do ask that any holidays are made outside of college times. We want students to come to college ready to learn with the right equipment, the right mindset and appropriate clothing. So right equipment obviously means pen, paper, rulers, calculator, any kind of workbooks that tutors may have provided. The right mindset, ready to learn and sort of able to engage in lessons, and appropriate clothing. So we don't have a uniform policy at the college. There is no uniform that we want our students to wear, but we do ask that students don't have bums, toms or Yes, boobs on show. Um, if we can make sure that it's appropriate clothing for a learning environment, we have to be mindful of the fact that we're working with pre-16 students here and they're working in a post-16 environment. So it's about thinking about sort of the other people that are within that environment as well. And I think I've covered respecting the learning environment. Okay, next slide, thank you. Okay, so moving on to student support. I'll just do this slide and then I can see that there are some further questions. So I'll do this slide first and then revert back to the questions. So all our electively home educated students are entitled to the same support as full-time post-16 students. So that means that essentially they are treated in the same way as our post-16 students. So that means that they have access to an achievement coach in whatever area they're working in. So every curriculum area has achievement coaches, and they're like the pastoral support for the college. So students can go to them if they've got any issues or concerns that are worrying them or potentially getting in the way of their learning. If there's an issue with a particular tutor that they don't feel able to address themselves and need some help and support with that, then the achievement coach can act as a bit of a go-between in that respect as well. If we've got students that are particularly struggling, then the achievement coach can offer weekly sessions, I say sessions, appointments, just to talk through how things have been, see if there's any sort of suggestions that they can give in terms of helping them with their particular difficulties at that time. It is important to note that an achievement coach is not a counsellor, and we don't have a counselling service at the college. But a lot of our students with mental health issues will spend time with an achievement coach just to talk things through. And then it's the role of the achievement coach to signpost them to other support agencies and other support services that may be able to help them better. Every student will have a personal tutor who will take their tutorial each week, and it may be that it's their tutor that they feel more able to talk to about any issues or concerns that they have. Part of that tutorial programme is about target setting, about making sure that students are on track, and where there are difficulties in that or concerns in that, then a personal tutor will talk through sort of strategies to help with those kind of things. And then in addition, you've obviously got the Pre-16 and schools team, which we've already introduced you to at the beginning of the presentation. We do have additional learning support within the college. So for students with an identified learning support need, they can be referred to our ALS teams, but it is again important to note that it is a finite resource, and like many education institutions, we do struggle to provide all of the support that we would want to for all of the students who potentially do have an additional need. So whilst we do have learning support assistants that are able to go into class, at High Pavement, for example, we only have 5 of those for over 1,000 students, well, close to 1,000 students. So you can see how difficult it might be to allocate that resource. So it is done on a priority basis in terms of any students who might have an education healthcare plan, or anybody who has a diagnosis, a medical diagnosis from GP, paediatrician or so forth. If a learning need has been identified on their application, that will go through to the additional learning support team within the college, and they will be on their radar. And the idea is that during the quieter summer months, those prospective students will be contacted to find out a little bit more about what support they may need, to discuss a support plan if appropriate, and that information then be provided to tutors once the student starts with us. It is again important to add that some of our, so we have additional support teams in terms of dyslexia, medical and physical, autism and behaviour. But they are teams across the whole college, and again they are small teams, so it may be that they're not able to get hold of everybody until the courses start. Yeah, think that explains everything. And then if students do need exam access arrangements, they will be assessed in college, but it is an assessment for access arrangements. So some students might get 25% extra time, they might get small groups, working in small groups, they might get supervised rest breaks, depending on what their additional need is. But it isn't for those students where there's a suspicion that they may be dyslexia or dyscalculia. They don't offer a diagnosis, they're not qualified to be able to do that. All they can do is identify that there may be a concern there, and therefore they're entitled to exam access arrangements. Okay, I'm just going to check the questions to see if I can answer some of those. Okay, so someone was just asking the question, if somebody were to do 6 GCSEs over 2 years, would they do 3 over 1 year and 3 over the following year, or would they do 6 over 2 years? All of our GCSEs are delivered within 1 year, so it would mean doing 3 GCSEs in the first year and then another different 3 set of GCSEs the following year. Initial assessments I'll come on to in a moment, so I will answer that question about where and when they're done. Question about not sure which course is right for your daughter. Again, when we bring up contact information at the end of the presentation, it might be best to make a note of that and then contact a member of the team so that we can talk through that with you personally. Okay, so support for children that have SEND need, social anxiety at school. So hopefully this slide has explained a little bit more, but I'm being honest with you in terms of what we can provide. We are still a learning institute, we are still a learning environment, and there are still expectations around attendance, there are still expectations around in being in lessons and being able to access and engage in lessons. And whilst we will do everything that we can to help and support a young person to get into lessons and to be able to engage appropriately, if a student is unable to do that, then we have to have conversations with parents about whether it's the right place for them to be learning. We are no different from a school in many respects, that there are still expectations of outcomes, and so we have to, for obvious reasons, be mindful of that. We do often find that the greater flexibility of the programmes that we're able to offer, the fact that a student doesn't have to be in college 5 days a week from 8:30 till 3:30, that the flexibility of that timetable works for a lot of those students that have experienced social anxiety previously within school. And also the fact that the way that the timetables work it can often be that they're only in for a couple of hours before then being able to go home. So that flexibility within the timetable is often enough to help and support with those social anxiety needs. But any kind of anxiety or mental health issue, initially it would be our achievement coaches that would be the first point of contact to see what support could be put in place. We can do wellness action plans, we can look at sort of any kind of reasonable adjustments for young people, but we have to be realistic that we are working towards qualifications at the end of the day, so we do require students to be in college. Son has 1 exam to sit in autumn that clashes with the lessons for the GCSE programme. Is that a problem? If it's just a one-off and it's just 1 exam, and then obviously we're not going to say that he can't go to the exam, that will be absolutely fine. There's a genuine reason as to why somebody would need to go in that circumstance. So a question about supporting pupils with school-based anxiety on transition into the programme. I'll come on to that. I'll cover that, I think, probably in what I say about the application to enrolment process. Okay. Question about careers advisors. Yes, we do have careers advisors at the college, and students are able to book an appointment with those careers advisors once they're on roll at the college. But beforehand, if you wanted a careers appointment, you can also do that via our website as well. And if you wanted further information about that, we can point you in the right direction. Okay. So there's a question about sharing information. The only information that we share with the local authority is the name of the student, and the fact that they have what course that they have applied for. So it's not about sharing any other personal information that you may have provided to us. It's just to share those names, just so that we can be certain that our local authorities are aware of those students that are applying for these courses, and to make sure that they're aware that they are registered as being electively home educated as well. That information normally would get passed on sort of from June onwards, once we've got a substantial number of applications in. There's no minimum number of GCSE subjects that you need to take. A student can take just one, or they can take up to 4, as I say. For extra time and exams, do they need a formal external diagnosis of dyscalculia, etc.? They don't need a formal diagnosis to have exam access arrangements. If there's a concern that a student may have difficulties with reading, writing, some of their maths work, then either myself or another member of staff can put in a referral to our learning support team, and that then will be picked up for an assessment to be made for exam access arrangements. So yeah, it's not a requirement to have a formal diagnosis for those access arrangements. Question about GCSE French and taking the exam as an external candidate. Unfortunately, we do offer an external candidate programme or service for subjects. However, GCSE French is not one of them. Languages, it's not one of them, because anything that's got a speaking and listening element or anything that's got a coursework element, we can't offer that speaking and listening assessment to take place. So unfortunately, that isn't something that the college can offer. Are GCSEs exams provided without charge? Yes, they absolutely are. There's no charge for any of the courses, any of the registrations for any of our subjects. We get the funding from the Education Skills and Funding Agency, so there's nothing for parents to pay. So I think I've answered the question about the GCSE course running over just the 1 year. And when will new applicants start if successful at the assessment? So all of our, I think Hilda's just replying to that one, so I will let her answer that, but we start all of our courses in September. Okay, next slide, please. Sorry, there is one last question on here. If my child already has a grade 5 in maths foundation, can they automatically be entered for the higher maths class? Theoretically, yes. But we would probably, our tutors would still need them to do the, I'm just trying to think about that one. Yes, I think they would still be able to do the higher maths class, so long as if it were looking at infill into the higher maths, it would be so long as there was no other clashes with any of the other subjects. Okay, so I'm just very conscious of time, and some people have already had to leave, so I'm just going to go through the rest of these slides. So we haven't got too many more, I don't think. So just from a safeguarding perspective, we do ask for parents to sign a permission to study and get parental consent, and part of that is also confirmation that your child is home educated. We just need to be making sure that you are happy that they do attend college. There's also on that consent form consent for any photography that's required for the course but not to be used in promotional material, and also permission for any trips and activities that might be associated with their course. Our lunchtime arrangements, obviously lunchtimes vary from course to course, but generally you're looking at lunchtimes being from sort of 12 to 1, that kind of time, usually around 45 minutes, but some might start at 12, some might start 12:15, some might not start until 12:30. We don't offer supervision at lunchtime. We haven't got the staff to be able to do that, but obviously there are always staff around and about, but it is important to note that we don't offer any kind of supervision at lunchtimes and break times. We do ask that communication is via email if possible, and all of this information is on the parental consent form. So The other, I talked earlier about attendance monitoring. If your child does not arrive at college when they're expected to, that will mean that an absence mark is entered into registers. That will automatically generate a text message to parents to say that your child hasn't arrived at college, and to contact James Smith to, if you haven't already done so, to explain their absence. It is sometimes the case that a student has arrived late, they've been marked absent, but then the register has been updated, and James can always check that. But we do monitor classes very closely, so for any lesson that your child is supposed to be in, they will be entered either a positive or a negative attendance mark, and where it's negative, that text will go to you, so you will be alerted if they've not arrived at college or not in a lesson for any reason. We keep a very close eye on peer relationships for obvious reasons from a safeguarding perspective, and if we do have any concerns, we will obviously raise that with parents to ensure that nobody is being that nobody is vulnerable, and that there's nothing untoward happening. Myself, I am one of the designated safeguarding officers for the college, and specifically for Pre-16 students. So if there are any concerns, they automatically get reported through to me, and then I'd be having conversations with parents. Next slide, please. Okay, so moving on to financial support. So again, home educated students are entitled to the same financial support for transport and any other associated costs with college that our post-16 students are entitled to. So it does mean that in order to gain that financial support, we require evidence of income. So we need to know that a certain threshold has been met. These applications are made on a first come first served basis, and that's because the college is given a certain amount of money to be able to support students. If that money runs out in the year, if somebody puts in a very late application, for example in May, it's possible that all of the funds have already been allocated, and therefore we always advise that an application is made as early as possible in the academic year. You know, if circumstances change, which means that you think that you might then be eligible to get the application in as early as possible. If you're making an application at the beginning of the academic year, there can be an initial delay due to the numbers of applications that can be processed. So you have to sort of appreciate that we need to wait for students to be enrolled before any of the applications for financial support can be processed. You will be given information about how to make the application, as it's all online and it's via the application account that you will have set up to make an application to college in the first instance. So please do remember what your password is, remember how to log in so that you can go ahead and make that application for support. So students can get support for transport. That can be train, it can be tram, it can be, unless there is a specific and very quite I can't think of the word. In very rare occasions, on very rare occasions, the college has funded taxis for young people, but it would be under very, very specific circumstances. So it's important to be aware that support for transport is only available for sort of trams, buses, trains, and so forth. If there are any associated costs with a course, that can be included. So for example, personal protective equipment might be needed on some of our vocational courses. Hair and beauty kits might be required, books on our GCSE or pre-GCSE programme. If a young person is deemed to be entitled to support for transport costs, they would then also be entitled to support for those material costs as well. And then in the last few years, we've also been able to offer meal vouchers as well for some of our students, and that's done on a graduated scale. So some students will receive a small amount per week, other students will receive a little bit more. It just depends on the individual circumstances. Next slide, thank you. Okay, so moving on to the application to enrolment process then. So most of you, I imagine, will already have completed their application form online, and you will have received an email to say that your application is on hold. All of our applications for Pre-16 students automatically go on hold, but it isn't anything to worry about. It is just so that the Pre-16 team can review the application, make contact with parents, get a little bit more information before we invite students in for their English and Maths assessments. But once we have got that information and we've spoken to parents, then we ask our admissions team to invite students in for initial assessment. So it can take a little bit of time to work through all of the applications. We do that in date order of applications. So some of you may already have made an application but haven't yet had contact from the Pre-16 team, but that will be happening in the coming weeks. Once we have asked our admissions to offer initial assessments, they will email you with a date, and we're holding all of our initial assessments at High Pavement, just because that's where we're based as a team, and they will be on a Monday morning. So they are running every Monday morning between now and the end of the academic year. So it will just come down to how many students we've got in each slot. So we take up to 15 students in each assessment slot. So it can take a little bit of time to get through all of the applications, as I'm sure you can appreciate. So again, if you've had the conversation with ourselves, but not yet had an initial assessment date, that isn't anything to worry about. It may be that your initial assessment date isn't until a little later on in the year, and we haven't yet sent the information through because we don't like to do it too early, because some parents can mislay the information. Once a student has been in for the initial assessment, if everything goes well and they've met entry requirements, then a student will be invited in for a group or individual interview with the curriculum area. So depending on the course that they've applied for will depend on the kind of interview that they'll be invited in for. That isn't anything to worry about. That's normally more about an information gathering exercise for both the curriculum team and yourselves. So it's an introduction to the team, it's finding out more about the course, it's perhaps having a tour of the building, and then an opportunity to ask questions. So don't be worried if when you get an invitation for the group or interview. So then a student, once the interviews taken place, the student will be offered a conditional place based on the return of the parental consent form sent at the time of the offer is made, and also based on some further information that we may ask for again from yourselves. So it is a conditional place, and it is all around that sort of confirmation that you have notified the local authority of either your intention to home educate, or that you can confirm that you are already home educated. So students will be invited in for an enrolment day in July or August, again depending on the curriculum area. The dates for those differ. For those doing the pre-GCSE Entry 3 and GCSE programme, we try to do them in July. For those looking at the infill programme, they do happen towards the end of August. There is usually, that week commencing I think probably is wrong, because didn't notice that there was a date there. I do apologise, but oh no, I think I did amend it. Look, it does say 2022. Yeah, so there will be an induction week commencing the 5th of September 2022, and then lessons themselves will start the following week. So that would be week commencing the 12th of September. Okay, I can see that there are some questions, so I will just have a look to see where we are with those. Okay. So the question is, the group interview a formality, or is there the possibility of being turned down at that stage? I'm reluctant to say that it's a formality. It's a process that we like to go through so that we can be certain that a young person fully understands what course it is that they've applied for, and that parents have understood that as well, and that they've been able to answer and get any answers to the questions that they may have specifically about the course. But it's extremely, somebody would have to misbehave very, very badly at their group interview for any questions to be raised as to their suitability to the course, or so I guess in some ways, yeah, the group interview, as I say, is nothing to worry about, but it is a process that we want our students to go through so that we can make sure that they're as best prepared as they can be and have got as much information about the courses as possible. So sorry, I did see in the questions from that were submitted prior to the presentation taking place, there was a question about whether there is a bus service. The college doesn't offer bus services. We do know that other colleges, Bilborough we know offers a bus service, but Nottingham College doesn't offer a bus service, so there isn't anything that is public transport or relying on parents, or students can walk as well. We like to encourage exercise. Okay. Yes, and I did mean to answer that question. So question about how quickly are the results confirmed after the assessment day. So from initial assessment, we get the results on the day. So when a student completes the assessment, then we can have a conversation with them and parents about what the next steps are likely to be and whether or not they have met entry criteria. Okay, question about my daughter thinks she has only applied for a vocational course and not the pre-GCSE course. What shall we do? Again, in a moment, I'll come up with contact details. If you can make a note of that and then email one of the team, we can make that check for you and add another course to that application if needs be. Question, our child has never been registered at school. Do I still need to inform the council about homeschooling? No. We will do that anyway, because as I say, we do share that information with the local authority. If you would prefer to be, you know, in control of that situation and notify them yourself, then that's absolutely fine. But yeah, there's no need for you personally to do that, because we will do that on your behalf. Question, is the same assessment threshold for entry 3 prep for college? Is there a cut-off or limited places for this, please? So the entry 3, sorry, I didn't cover that on that slide, I do apologise. There is entry criteria. We would need students to be working. We can accept students that are working at entry 2, entry 3. But we need at least 1 English or maths to be at entry 3. So it's probably a conversation to have when we get the results from the initial assessment. There is we keep to 10 places on the preparation for college course, so that's a smaller group again. Does the GCSE assessment apply for vocational courses too? So for anybody applying for this short course vocational courses, there is no initial assessment for that. So what we do is we keep a note of everybody who has made an application, and then we contact those students and parents in the summer to give further details about the course. But there is no entry criteria for those particular courses because of their vocational nature. Is there a break between lessons? For example, 2 hours, can students leave the college? So there is a 15-minute break between each 2-hour block on the GCSE programme. So they'll do an hour, have a 15-minute break, and then a further hour. It is important to stress though, 15 minutes isn't that long, and as they're studying at High Pavement or any of the other campuses, there's very little that they can get to in that time. If they're thinking, oh, I can quickly nip to Tesco's and grab myself a meal deal and get back again within 15 minutes, that's not possible. So we wouldn't advise students leaving at break times, but in the longer lunch break, then yes, they have the opportunity to leave. But we do ask parents to sign to say that they give permission for them to leave, although again, we can't monitor that. If we see a student who we know hasn't got permission leaving the college, then we can query it and sort of say, oh, your parent hasn't given you permission, but we can't monitor it in any way. Does High Pavement have a sensory room or quiet place for children with sensory issues? Space is a premium at all of our campuses, and this is a question that does come up, and it is something that our ALS teams have requested on numerous occasions, but unfortunately, as far as I'm aware, there aren't any rooms available for students to be able to use for that reason. We are able to sort of say to students that they're welcome to use classrooms if they're not being used at break times and lunch times, and very often they are empty and they can find a quiet space, or our library, they can use the library, and that's obviously a quiet space as well. But Lindsay, again, if there's a specific need there, perhaps contacting a member of the team personally, and then we can talk you through what the options might look like. What happens if my child has other educational commitments 4 lunchtimes a week? we would need to find out more about what that would mean. So again, I think that's a question either to pop in an email or to give us a call about. Oh, we've done the transitional. Oh yes, so you had asked the question about the transitional arrangements for anxious pupils. So in terms of the application to enrolment, because when they come in for initial assessment, they come into high pavement, we can, as part of that, if required, we can incorporate a bit of a tour of the building there and have a bit of a chat about what else might be required to help that young person feel more comfortable in that environment. If a young person might require a visit to the campus prior to them doing the initial assessment because their anxiety is such that they're a bit worried about coming in to do the assessment without seeing the building first, we can organise that as well. So please do contact us directly and we can see what we can do to organise that. When they come in for their group or individual interview, that's another opportunity to get to know the college and to meet members of staff. So that again, hopefully will form part of a transition programme. But if there's something that may be needed in addition to that and something a bit more bespoke because of the particular needs of a young person, then we can talk through what might be possible. But again, if you can contact us directly about that, we'll see what we can do. So is it likely students will commence studies week commencing 12th of September? Yes, they will. So as I've explained, there'll be the induction week prior to that, week commencing the 5th of September, and then lessons themselves will begin week commencing 12th of September. Oh, Hilda's answered that already. Well done, Hilda, thank you. So how's best to prepare for a revise for the initial assessments? And Hilda is replying to that, but I will answer it for everybody as well. When you get invited to the initial assessments, you will be provided with an overview of what's involved in the initial assessment and what's required, and the breakdown of the different elements of the assessment, and a recommendation to do some work around those areas prior to the assessment itself. So hopefully when you receive your invitation for the assessment, you will also get that information and that will answer that question. Question about when the vocational short course in media studies might be. This year it's run on a Friday afternoon. It's possible it will be a Friday afternoon next year, but until the timetables are confirmed later in the summer, I can't give you that answer, I'm afraid. When are we likely to know if there are places on infill courses? My daughter is interested in animal science. So we are working through applications as we speak, and somebody will be in contact when an application is received to get some further details, and then we will put you forward for firstly the initial assessment and then the group interview. If everything goes well at that point, then obviously there will be that offer of a conditional place. It is important to note though that we usually are only able to offer 2 places within animal science because it's quite a small course, so we can only take up to 2 places with our pre-16 students. As far as I'm aware at the moment, there haven't been any applications for animal science. I was looking at the infill applications yesterday and I don't think I saw one for animal science, but apologies if you have made that and I've missed it. But yeah, certainly if it is there, I think it would only be you that's made that application. A question again about the number of places on the GCSE courses. So just to remind people that for the majority of our GCSE subjects, we have up to 22 students in a class, but we do have 4 classes of English. So that's obviously 88 students, 3 classes of maths, so 66, 2 of biology and 2 of psychology, so that is 44, doing my maths quickly, and then for all of the other subjects it's 22, apart from business studies where it's just 20. Okay, I think that's the end of those questions. So next slide, please. Oh, there we go. Any questions? Okay, so I am really hopeful that we've been able to answer any questions that you may have had. My screen's just gone off. Let me pull that back up again. Please do make a note of these email addresses here if you do have any further questions that you would like to ask us. I know that there were quite some specific questions around sort of support needs that I think would be best answered via email or via a phone call. So if you make a note of these email addresses, you can email us and either put your question in the email and request a phone call, or hopefully we may be able to answer via email as well. So I think We will leave that slide up for a few minutes so that people can make a note of that, take a photo of it on your phones if you would like to. In these next few minutes, if anybody else has any further questions, then please do. But that's it from me, unless any further questions appear. Thank you so much for your time this evening. I really do appreciate it, and I really look forward to meeting your young people when they come in for initial assessment. Thank you.